This week, the American Academy of Pediatrics published a new study on transgenderism that purportedly finds that social contagion has not led to an increasing number of adolescents coming out as transgender. Simply put, they're claiming that transgenderism is not spreading among young people due to the influence of those around them and the culture. Now, this contradicts a 2018 Brown University study that's often cited in policies that discourage gender surgeries on children. The most recent study's authors admit that they and the team were looking for the results they found, leading to many questions about whether the data can be trusted. And joining me now to discuss it is Dr. Jennifer Bauwens, Director of the Center for Family Studies at FRC. Dr. Bauwens, good to see you.
Good to be with you again, Joseph.
Now, I know that this paper was just released a couple days ago, and academics like to have a lot of time to dig through the data and have strong opinions. But what's your initial reaction to the findings, what you've been able to see in this study so far?
Okay, well, I think one important thing to keep in mind here is that the American Academy for Pediatrics has already come under fire in the last, not even within the last couple of weeks. They're under fire for suppressing their membership's comments. And so this is the same organization that's putting forth this research article. They didn't want their members commenting on their concerns about transgender procedures. So curiously, here they are producing this this paper within just weeks of this debacle that they've gone through in their organization. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that Dr. Jack Turbin is a University of California, San Francisco professor who's highly invested in trans ideology and was very much a part of that whole doctrine that says, children will commit suicide if they don't if they don't go through these medical procedures. So this is really important to keep in the backdrop. Before you even get to the data, we have to kind of consider the source of where this data is coming from.
And to that point, this whole idea that they would run a study questioning whether it's actually a social contagion is the fact that they think that is necessary evidence that they recognize that this social contagion argument has legs and that people are seeing the dramatic increase in the number of young people identifying as transgender. I've seen some studies up to 30% of young people between the ages of 18 and 24 are identifying as some version of LGBT. Most of that is the T. Are they vulnerable? Are they recognizing that this is undermining their whole attempt to say it's just biology?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very much a reaction to a lot of what the states are doing to protect children. So they're running defense right now. So when you just look at a very cursory view of this data, the researchers, this is CDC data, by the way. It wasn't constructed in a way to look at the things that Dr. Turbin has concluded. So he makes a lot of leaps. And here's the other thing, Joseph. When you make a statement or your research finds something that is so contrary to what we know of human nature or the way things work, the onus is on you as the researcher to explain that and to suggest, hey, because this phenomenon looks like an anomaly, we need more research to replicate this. And all the more when we're looking at procedures that are so invasive to the bodies of not just human beings or adults, but children. Yeah. So, for example, if I were to tell you that, caffeine intake, as you increase a caffeine intake, that you don't have more anxious symptoms, you'd say, Jennifer, I don't know about that. I found myself jittery. I don't know if I can buy that conclusion. Well, the same holds true in this case. We know that children are impacted by their surroundings, by their peers. And to all of a sudden say that there's no influence, be it social media, be it all of the schools that are propagating this ideology, The onus is on Mr. Turban to explain how is it that that there is no sense of peer
Dr.
pressure or influence on these kids.
I want to squeeze one more question here if I can, because what the data has suggested is in the most Western countries, we've seen somewhere between a 1,000% and 5,000% increase in transgender identities among teenage girls. Now, let's assume we could prove that it's not a social contagion. Theoretically, what are the other explanations for this?
Yeah, and here's the other thing that you see, just again, with a very cursory view at this data. Human behavior is complicated, and it's very rarely just one variable or one factor that's creating some kind of behavioral response. There's usually other things. And like in this case, we know that kids have more trauma, more childhood traumatic events that they've encountered. And those who identify as trans have those backgrounds. Sometimes children who have a diagnosis of autism also tend to identify as trans. So there are all these other factors that are not being played out in this study that would fully explain, or better explain rather, what's going on with a child.
Dr. Bauwens? And we are going to have to come back to better explain this because we are out of time for now. But thank you for the introduction to this, and we will have you back on to talk about this more, I know. Thank you for your time. Coming up,